Hello and welcome to this special webinar from Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, which will focus on how retail businesses can get back to work safely. My name is David Elliott from Lanyon Group, and I'll be your host today for what promises to be a really interesting session for anyone involved in retail who is preparing to open their doors for the first time after lockdown. We have two fantastic speakers to take us through the practicalities of reopening in these unprecedented times, when new social distancing rules will be a challenge, not just from a safety point of view, but also when it comes to merchandising. This webinar comes just days after Economy Minister Diane Dodds said all non-essential goods retail businesses in Northern Ireland can open their doors to the public. While a relief for business owners, the rush to get shops ready under the new guidance has prompted plenty of questions to the Council, and we're hoping to answer a lot of these today. We're going to hear from Elizabeth Rainey from the Environmental Health Department at ABC Council. Elizabeth will walk us through the practical steps which businesses need to adhere to keep staff and customers safe. Then we're going to hear from Mags McAlpin from Creating Retail Magic, who is an expert in visual merchandising, window displays and theming events. Mag's going to talk us through how to create magic within your store and within the new guidelines. They're each going to give us a 10-minute presentation, and then we're going to have time at the end to throw in a few questions. But first, we're lucky enough to have Councillor Kevin Savage, who is Lord Mayor of Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, with us this morning. He's going to say a few words of introduction. Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, David. As Lord Mayor of Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough, it gives me great pleasure to introduce this information video, the first in a series of sector-specific resources for retailers across the borough as they reopen their doors to customers. As a council, we are here to support and provide advice to our local business community and promote the message that our town centres are safe and that our retailers are working extremely hard to ensure the safety of staff and customers while putting measures in place to minimise risks. I hope this video will provide additional guidance and information, particularly for those retailers concerned about how to manage stock that can be tried on for size, such as clothing, footwear, jewellery and other accessories. I would like to thank Mags McAlpin of Creating Retail Magic, Elizabeth Rainey, Environmental Health Manager, and David Elliott, Lanyon Communications, for their contribution, and hope you find their insight and expertise useful.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for those encouraging words. Now it's time to dive straight in to hear about some of the practical steps that retailers need to be adhering to under the new guidance. I'm Elizabeth Rainey from the Environmental Health Department at ABC Council. Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you, David. In environmental health, this really is just another stage dealing with the high streets reopening. It's another stage of the coronavirus pandemic for the environmental health team. We have a brilliant team of officers who, since the lockdown commenced really back in March, have been providing advice. They've been dealing with concerns about COVID, as the food retail sector and the takeaway food business is still continuing to trade during the past 3 months. And as businesses, and indeed we as the general public, started a totally new set of behaviours. So in ABC Council, we've been dealing with hundreds of queries, and we're now very happy to help with our small independent retailers and our high streets to reopen safely. So probably the first thing I want to do is to reassure our businesses in this borough that they're not alone. Information is available on the COVID-19 business section of the council, on the website, and there are frequently asked questions and checklists, and both environmental health officers and the town centre managers are very much available on the telephone or by email with any queries to deal with any questions that you have so that businesses can reopen safely. We accept that reopening is a huge day for the retail sector and our high street shops as we move into what really will be a new norm. Next slide. So one of the conditions that you will have heard in any of the announcements from the Northern Ireland Executive about reopening is that your business should be COVID secure or have completed a COVID-19 risk assessment. Now this may sound rather overwhelming, and to reassure business owners that it is the same process you apply to other hazards in your workplace. While it is a legal requirement under the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations, it is about doing everything, and I want you to remember that word, everything reasonably practicable to minimise the risk of COVID-19 transmission in your business. In practice, and when I read out to you the words They're now words that we're using every day, and they should remain in your focus to reduce the transmission of coronavirus in your workplace. And those are social distancing. Yes, we've all heard it, remaining at the moment at 2 meters. Obviously, the cleaning and the hand washing. And then the last one, which is very important, that employees or owners that have symptoms or potential symptoms of coronavirus stay at home. And I know this can be especially difficult as time goes on, because our business owners, they're usually people who rarely take a day off, and sometimes they often have come into work when they're not feeling well. So this is very different, and now there is this very serious risk when they come into work of spreading the virus in the shop, and that could be a real reality. Next slide. So to pick up on the first one of those, then, the term social distancing, it's a new norm, but you know, someone reminded me this week that there was an old saying that's saying you wouldn't touch someone with a 6-foot barge pole. So maybe this concept of social distancing was something that is not new after all. It's important as we start thinking about social distancing that we start outside your shop on the footpath or on the pavement. We've all seen the queues outside the grocery shops and the businesses, and certainly you will now need to consider any potential for queues. There are very few shops that have been open up until now, and remember, people will happily queue in good weather, but whenever the high street reopens fully, businesses will need to be chatting with their neighbouring businesses. They need to be putting in place some type of system to manage the customers that are outside your premises. And it is probably a good time to mention here, while it may not be your normal practice, business do need to consider maybe working by appointment, working later in the evening to reduce that potential for queues, and probably to accommodate some customers who do not feel maybe very comfortable being out and about. And certainly Mags has some really good messages about that later on in the presentation. We found that some of the food retail businesses that were permitted to open, they ended up that they would have closed maybe over lunchtime, or they found that they maybe closed earlier in the evening just to provide some valuable time to do some extra cleaning, and also that staff needed the time because they were under more pressure. Now, these are all different ways of working, but they're certainly worth giving some thought to. Looking then at social distancing inside the shop, and again, Mags is going to look a wee bit around that and around floor areas, but you will have to look at your floor area and work out how many people you can allow and still maintain social distancing. Remember, you need to consider those restricted areas, the pinch points, the toilets, the staff areas, and obviously use the floor markings. You've seen them in retail and food retail. Use the floor markings if necessary. And while it may not always be possible to have a one-way system, certainly if you can, and you have 2 different doors as well, separate entrance and exit doors is good, but we accept it's not always possible, especially in small retail. Next slide. The social distancing applies to all parts of your business, including the entrances, the exits, the break rooms, and the staff areas, as well as the toilets. So as you carry out your COVID-19 assessment, or when you review as you start to reopen, there will be things that you will have to consider and change. You may need to have an employee to meet and greet customers at the door to explain the requirements and to restrict access. And again, from our learning from food retail, businesses found that they had to stagger break times to reduce the pressure on staff rooms. And they also, especially in this lovely weather that we've had, they provided some seats outside for staff breaks. Businesses also have found that encouraging safety messages over a tannoy system is very useful, because sometimes we get a little tired of the posters and they don't have the same effect. So certainly use every message means that you can to get your message across. The businesses in the retail sector that already opened also find that management and owners had to keep really a constant monitoring of all the measures that were happening to make sure the controls were working. We don't get it perfect, and we won't get it perfect at the start, but we are in this new norm for the foreseeable. And so with feedback from employees and often from customers, some adjustments will have to be made as the weeks go ahead. Employees need to be safe, and they need to feel safe, and customers need to feel safe. And we've clearly seen in some of the businesses that have opened in food that where a business is being serious about the COVID controls, The public are also more likely to take it serious. And if there's one message I certainly want you as a business to take on board, is that if you want the public to comply, they have to see it in your premises. There may be occasions where you can't meet that 2-meter rule in some parts of your premises, or maybe in some of the services that you will hope to provide. So the first question there you have to ask is, do I need to provide that service? So possibly it's you provide alterations or you provide bra fitting. Do you actually need to offer that service, or can I offer it in a different way? If you can't, and there are no other solutions, and the 2-meter remains an issue, then we are entering into good practice. And that is where screens or barriers will need to be used to separate people. And we're seeing these at till areas in the grocery sector. It is also very important, if you are working within that 2-meter with a customer, that you keep the time spent or the activity time as short as possible. And again, when you have been working inside a 2-meter shared space, hand washing is key. And I know this will be more difficult, especially as shops get busier, but it is really essential to control this virus. Next slide, please. As I said, hand washing and cleaning remain a key message in this pandemic. All staff should be washing their hands before coming to work and before leaving work as well as regularly throughout the day. And the public also need to be encouraged to wash hands, and hand sanitizer should be provided. The COVID-19 assessment that you will be carrying out will hopefully have identified a very strict cleaning regime, concentrating on your door handles, clothes hangers, or other frequently touched areas such as tills and computers. This cleaning will be well above what you normally do. You will note in this slide as well, I've mentioned the importance of a deep clean before reopening. Remember, premises have been empty for a number of months, and they should be taking particular care with hot water systems and showers if you've been them in the premises, because of the risk of Legionella. And again, if you need any further advice, please contact the Environmental Health Department. Next slide. Now, I was asked by the team in preparing for this webinar that there was two in particular areas that they wanted my attention, and that was on fitting, and particularly fitting shoes. And the second area was around clothes and changing rooms. Unfortunately, we don't have all the answers. Picking up on the first one around the shoe shops and shoe fitting. Again, the first question that you have to ask is, can I offer the service in a different way? And if not, then the business needs to very much limit any customer handling of shoes. And that may mean that you may have to change your displays to reduce handling and rotate, particularly stock that people feel the need to come in and touch. And we all like a little feel of what we're going to buy. But where a fitting service is needed and there is no automated options for measuring, then screens could be used in shoe shops where the 2-meter distance cannot be met. Obviously, the customers would remove their own shoes. The retailer will then select the shoes from the display for fitting, and the screen will provide a physical barrier other than for the feet. And obviously, there should be no bare feet. Customers would be very much encouraged to shop alone, and particularly with children, reminded to take responsibility for social distancing rules. So you have the partition screen then between the shop assistant and the customer. And that screen and the customer seat should be cleaned frequently and typically between each customer. Each staff should have their own workstation for fitting. And again, because they're within the 2 meters, staff must have excellent hand hygiene frequently and between each customer. And it's now recommended that you should think about using face coverings for short periods of time when the social distancing of the 2 meters cannot be met. Next slide, please. Again, with regard to changing rooms, guidance at the moment is fairly limited, but it is suggesting that fitting rooms should be closed where possible, except for essential, should only be used where essential workers are hoping to fit clothing. This is very challenging, and we have been in contact with some of the businesses that are providing protective clothing for key workers, and their COVID-19 risk assessment. And the things that they have considered within that is they have used every other changing room rather than adjacent changing rooms to allow social distancing of customers and to reduce risk. They have been cleaning really thoroughly and frequently between each use. No makeup, scarves, and all the surfaces in the changing rooms should be easily cleanable. so that there will be no soft chairs. So the advice at the moment is very much to limit customer handling of merchandise, to consider other ways that your clothing can be displayed, to reduce handling and to reduce trying on, possibly using mannequins or a virtual display of the different items and models. Again, similar to the shoe fitting service, for the fitting of clothes, contact between customers and staff should be minimized, and we are seeing some very innovative standing screens out there at the moment that allows staff to actually reach through the screen and provide a fitting service. This is all very new to everyone. The guidance at the moment that we're providing is that fitting rooms should, however, remain closed other than for those essential workers. You'll also note the last point in my slide, which suggests that items such as shoes and clothing are stored for 72 hours before they are displayed or tried on again. Again, this will present some challenges, particularly for our small retailers. Further information is emerging on this, and there may be some time reduction around the storage of shoes, but at the moment it remains at 72 hours. Thank you very much for listening. Please contact the Environmental Health Department at any time. Have a look at the checklist and the frequently asked questions on our website, and we will do all we can to assist you getting opened. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a brilliant run through of the key points that retailers need to bear in mind. And who would have thought that six-foot barge pole would come back into fashion so much. Talking of fashion, now it's time to hear from Mags McAlpin from Creating Retail Magic, who I know you'll find really inspiring. She brings her creative touch to your retail space. Mags, over to you.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on this broadcast. We want to really, I guess, reassure you, first of all, that it's new times, but we're trying to do our best to help you and use our experience to give you the right guidance. What we're going to do in the next 10 minutes is a short reopening plan. Thanks to Elizabeth there, you will have had some good practical guidelines as to how you should be reopening the shop and managing the experience until we get used to things. What I want to do with us now is just have a look at really two areas. I want us to get ready to reopen. So we're going to have a look at your store layout, and we're going to create a safe welcome to your shop. This is really important. We're trying to, I guess, offset any perception of a clinical experience. Remember, shopping and retail therapy is about fun, and we want to try and bring that back in to alleviate the concerns and fears that we all naturally have as shop owners, as consumers, as leisure shoppers. So we're going to look at that, looking at our store layouts, creating a safe welcome, and we're going to focusing on creating a warm welcome back. So my experience of, I would say over 40 years now of window dressing. I did my first window display when I was 3 years old in my grandfather's shop in Dublin. It was a Star Wars window, so lots of tin foil and crepe paper and glitter. So that set me on the path to being a window dresser. So I want to use 4 decades of experience to try and give you some ideas in these next few minutes. So the key images you might see on your screen there are really tell your customers, welcome back, great to see you, what's changed, we're doing our best for you. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So a little synopsis in the visual there of all the really salient and important points that Elizabeth pointed out to us. Where possible, keep your changing rooms closed, use plastic screens, use hand sanitizers. Consider your 72-hour quarantine as it is at the moment for tried-on items. In the layout and the flow of the traffic, which we'll look at in a second, the overview is try and keep your customers 6 feet away from each other and remove those pinch points. Have a look at your floor in a very objective way and see where you can open up more space. Next slide, please. So I've popped down 6 typical floor layouts that we use in shop fitting and retail interiors. You may identify straight away one that is familiar to you. It might be how your shop is laid out at the moment. So if it is, Have a look at the space around it and see where you can free up some more space to encourage the free flow, the safe flow of traffic. Maybe one of these new arrangements could suit you better. Is there any inspiration you can take from that? There's a few ideas there. You could remove central tables, remove end of aisle units. And of course, if you have 2 doors, that's wonderful. If you don't, think about how you create your one-way system. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I've tried to put as many photographs and images as possible for you so that you can have a look and think, okay, that could really, really work for me. Take a snap of it. But what I want you to do on this slide is have a look. The key questions are, can you reduce any of your mid-floor gondolas, your aisle end units, or your promotional displays just to free up more space? The key objectives are to give definitive directions. So that's your floor tape markings, your signage, your barriers, and increase, of course, that customer flow in a controlled one direction. Elizabeth also mentioned a really good idea, which has definitely, I think, been working very well in shops that have reopened. It's great to have lots of signage, and please do have signage. But if you have a PA system, or you have one of your staff that is able to interact in a safe way with your customers, just to reinforce the social distancing and managing the situation, that is much more the human contact side of things. And again, we're trying to eliminate this clinical, perhaps fearful experience of being in a shop again. Remember, there have been many of us for the last 3 months that have not gone into a shop at all. Or we've had very limited contact in interior spaces. Maybe we've just stood outside the shop, placed your order at the door, and it's been brought to us. So we have to just readjust and be very, very sensitive to, I think, the mental health aspect to this. And again, it's to try and create an enjoyable experience for everyone. So using the words enjoyable, let's look at attractive. Can you use attractive mid-floor displays to create those barriers, those paths, those walls? That could be like using mannequins. Maybe you need to get some in if you don't have any. Use some plants displays or flower arrangements. Use your clothes rails to create those barriers and paths. There's a nice picture there of using a clothes rail, changing it to a plant display. It's a beautiful idea of creating a screen. Again, creating all the positive visual impact on what you want to create in your store. Similarly, you could look at using some shelving units, some tables, some ladders. The caveat I have on that is always just think about surfaces, because you will need to, as Elizabeth has guided us, you need to keep cleaning and ensuring everything is hygienic and as clean as possible. On that slide there, you'll also see a sign. It's from the shoe repair and dry cleaning and key cutting service called Timpson's. They have produced these welcome back signs. What could you do in your store? What is your signage going to be like to say, welcome back, come into this controlled, safe as possible environment? That's what we want you to have for your customers. Next slide, please. So just thinking about appeal and attractiveness, there's an expression called your curb appeal. So this is the outside. It's the point of contact that people have with your business. Pre-COVID, this was always a very good starting point. Stand outside your shop with an objective eye and look at it. Of course, your windows should be clean, and all the little cobwebs and maybe little dead insects that lurk around should all be removed. But how is it going to appeal to the people that are waiting outside to come in, or those that are driving by or walking by with the intention to come in? Some of the big organizations, the big retail organizations that we are seeing in the likes of Germany and Australia and even China, they are using a lot of technology. So they're putting screens in their windows or outside their windows, and it's a live feed to show people what's going on in the shop. It's also showing them where they are in the queue. So it's managing their expectation. They're also using these interactive screens to offer promotions and sale items. So again, engaging people and stimulating the opportunity to buy, to purchase. Whilst that might be something that you wish to do or can do at the moment, Go back to basics. Think about your front of your store. Is it appealing to the queue? So is it nice and clean? Does it need a little touch of paint? Have you flower boxes? Can you use them? Do they need to be tidied up? How is your signage? What is your lighting like? Do you need some more lighting? Do you need to replace any more lamps in your lights? Do you have a canopy? Is it nice and tidy? Is it in good condition? Is it something equally that you might consider fitting to your store, subject to all the regulations and cost, of course, around that? We can see that there will be queuing outside shops for a little while now in the future. So while we've been blessed with beautiful weather over the last few months, we know what the weather in Northern Ireland is like. So thinking about that, I've got some more ideas about that for you in a few minutes. I've also popped a little note down there about safe entertainment. Now, again, this must always be done within social distancing and safety regulations and concerns. But I was thinking, if you're standing outside in a queue for a shop, what might interest you, keep you stimulated? It's almost like the idea in a lift, mirrors are put in the lift, and it's to stop you thinking about the journey up to where you're going. It's to shorten the journey in the lift, because you're looking in the mirror, you're amusing yourself, you're being entertained by yourself. So again, on that idea, is there any way that you could bring in safe entertainment? Play music with your regulations and your licenses, of course, or any other little things that you could bring in to create an attractive retail theatrical environment. There's some lovely pictures on the slides here of a sign that says, "Welcome back, we missed you." And then please feel free to help yourself to our sanitization station. Again, very important messages that need to be communicated. If you have been able to arrange a collection service or even a delivery, here's some four little points to show you. Put in place clear procedures to minimize person-to-person close contact during those deliveries and collections. It's all about staying safe, of course. Have consistent pairings of teams where 2 persons deliveries are required. And if you can minimize that contact during the payments and any exchange of documentation, of course, that's the best thing, using electronic payment methods, electronically signed or exchanged documents. And again, another big development we've noticed in retail is curbside pickup points. So a designated area at your premises where people who have rang in earlier or placed an order online can come and pick up in a safe area. So these are curbside pickup points. Is that something you could do in your business? Next slide, please. So you are welcome and safe in the shop. This is really the overview of what we're looking at. Use your windows, facade, and any external space you have available to engage and excite your customers. Use your positive signage and even staff uniforms with messages on the front and back with positive messages to say, "We care, we're looking after you." What's your visual impact through your fresh plants, your colours, your displays? And again, to avoid clinical association in this retail experience, think about what is an attractive scent. Vanilla, fresh citrus, beautiful apple blossom, things like that are beautiful to have in your shop. And that could be achieved simply by even a plug-in air freshener. Things like that are really nice to use. Another idea to welcome back your customers are maybe to create some goodie bags, which might contain some, again, free gifts of stock that you have left over or you wish to use up, some vouchers, or to even think about some private events whereby there are designated areas that people come according to social distancing rules in their small groups, almost like private shopping sessions. So it could be invitations for events like that. I was also thinking that in these days of austerity and people just watching our money where we are at the minute, wouldn't introducing Savings Club be an interesting addition to your business to help your customers have that good experience? Importantly also, bring your space to life online. It doesn't have to be a professional video, just do a walk around with your phone, do a live session on one of your social media platforms, just to show we are here, we're awake, we're back at it, here's our space, come into it. Next slide, please. So we're going to be wrapping up now. I'm going to give you 3 simple steps on visual merchandising and window dressing, how to achieve it, how to revamp your window displays. So the 3 points we're going to look at are theme, colour, and most importantly in many ways, call to action. On this slide, you'll see some images of a very important message, which is from one of the shops in Italy who's just come out of lockdown. It's a clothes shop and they have a sale on, a 30% discount saying back to shopping. A very, very simple, clear, unambiguous message to say to your customers, come in and spend and enjoy. You'll also see some nice images of a jewellery display, a shoe display and a fashion display. Next slide, please. So, theme is really important. We create our theme for window displays around many things. Normally the retail calendar, an in-house event, for example, we're open again, come back into us. Suppliers promotion, a local economic initiative, or a local tourist or cultural occasion, or just because. On the slide here, you will see a really nice photograph of a back to school window, because of course we've got summer coming up, but one of our big retail promotions coming up now will be back to school, thinking about the children getting, of course, their shoes, their clothes, their school bags, all of those things as well. This is a very, very simple window display to do. It uses a blackboard, some coloured paper airplanes, and some school bags. There's also another really nice image here that has a message saying the sun will rise again, we are in this together. So what kind of nice images or sentiments could you put on your window display for your customers? Next slide, please. The second principle of creating your display is around colour. You have the colour wheel, and if you have a look, colours that will be all shades of one will work really well together. So beautiful shades of oranges, reds into yellows. Then you have ones that are next to each other on the colour wheel. We call these analogous. So these are lovely blues and greens and turquoises. Think the gorgeous sea colours on a summer's day. And you have complementary. So these will be ones that will be opposite each other. For example, typical Christmas displays, reds and greens will set off against each other. We have a lovely image here, which I think is perfect for coming into the autumn. It's gorgeous cooking apples and rich succulent blackberries. So it's the greens against the purples. Again, colour inspiration for your displays. Not just window displays, but displays inside your shop. Table displays, counter displays, little things you can photograph and put on your social media as well. Next slide, please. So this is very important, and this is kind of to wrap up almost where we are this morning. Think Alice in Wonderland. When Alice fell down the hole and she was all disorientated and confused, she found a cake which said, eat me, and the bottle that said, drink me. So she was told what to do, and that made her calm, and she knew what she had to do next. This call to action is really important in displays and in visual merchandising. If you have a message, a clear message in your display or your space, that message will increase the effectiveness of your display by 53%. Statistics show this. So what do you want your customer to do, and what will they get in return? So you want them to come into your shop. They will feel comfortable and cared for in their shop. These are the messages. We are open, welcome back. I mentioned earlier as well, perhaps you want to set up something like a saving scheme. Explain the benefits of that to them. Join now, save your money, we will look after you. Next slide, please. So, the final tips for creating your display. Well, first of all, what are your brand's keywords? Think about what they are. Also, what is your own philosophy? These last few months have really given us all the opportunity to reevaluate where we are personally and professionally. Think about where you are now. What is your philosophy? What way do you want your business to go? And what is the philosophy of your customers? How does your community work? So on that basis, what themes and messages and topics will appeal to your customers? Because this will give you your inspiration for how you will lay out your shop, how you will do your displays. There's some pictures on this slide as well that use images on shop windows like hope, really, really important. Welcome back, be kind, seize the day, all of those really nice things. And of course, we've got back to school soon. So on that basis, I really wish you the best with your business. Stay focused, stay calm, stay positive. We will get all through this together, and I wish you the absolute best going forward. Thank you.
Mags, thanks so much for that really interesting stuff in there. And what struck me was the human side of getting people back into your shops and really reintroducing them to shopping again. The common themes I saw across both your presentations was that you need to reinforce that message about social distancing and about just looking after each other and staff, etc. Now, both those presentations have been pretty comprehensive so far today and have provided us with plenty of food for thought. We now have time for a quick Q&A, which will allow us to just put some questions that have filtered through from retailers to the council over the last few weeks, to both of our guests. Mags, I think while you're on there, we might as well start with you. And this is one I know you're pretty hot on. What advice can you give to businesses regarding their window dressings?
Thanks, Emil, for asking me that, David. The first thing is take an objective look at your shop from the outside. Ensure the front of your shop is presented to the best way possible, that it's clean, it's freshly painted, it's dressed with flowers or plants if you can do that. In your window displays itself, where we start creating visual merchandising, we always start with a calendar. So we plan our displays. So at the moment now we are in June. So we should be thinking, what am I putting in for the next 2 months of the summer, so July and August. We might be looking at a summer seaside theme, and then going into August, maybe starting to bring in elements of autumn or elements of back to school, of course. So think about your retail plan. When we go into September, it's the back to school, it's the autumn aspects, but then of course we'll be going into the next big promotion, which will be Halloween. And then as soon as Halloween is over, we need to be into Christmas. But this is the time now. So the first tip I would say, look at the next few months to the end of this year and work out where your plans and your promotions are going to be so you can plan your displays. And to get inspiration from for your windows, we as professional designers, we will look back on past projects that we've done. We will also look at the likes of online resources such as Pinterest and Instagram. And from that, we will take a lot of ideas and we will twist and make them our own. The most important thing is, I would always say, try now these days, have a window display and a frontage that reassures, going back to what you said there, reassures people that they are coming into a safe and controlled environment. So use positive messages on your glass, even if it's getting chalk markers that rub off glass quite easily, and write some really encouraging messages or little images. Maybe even get your own children to do a cute drawing on the glass. Things like that are just really, really appealing and touching the heart at the moment. And of course, I would always say, if your budget and business allows, contract professional window dressers to help you put together a plan, to even teach you how to do your own displays going forward.
Super, Mags. It's definitely a skill. Elizabeth, if I could turn to you with this subject that has been in the news for many weeks now of PPE, and I suppose what it really means for retailers. And this is a question that came in. What protection clothing do you recommend I provide for staff?
Yes, David, thank you. As you say, PPE is another one of those buzzwords over the last few months, and certainly in the retail sector, we would be advising it would be the last resort to actually have to provide PPE, and that all those other measures that I mentioned earlier would be the priority. So that is your social distancing and hand washing. However, if your risk assessment, when you carry it out, does identify that PPE is required, then you should provide that PPE free of charge to staff who need it. I know there's some recommendations now around face coverings, that it is beneficial as a precautionary measure, and the evidence does suggest that wearing a face covering may not protect you, but it may protect others if you're infected and you've not developed the symptoms. We are saying certainly if your risk assessment identifies you need them, then you should be advising staff with regard to face coverings that how to put them on, that you should be washing your hands before you put them on, that when you're wearing it, you should still avoid touching your face or your face covering, and obviously that it should be changed and washed every day. With regard to gloves, again, they often give a false sense of security. Again, if it's not something that you've identified in your risk assessment, we again suggest hand washing is the preferred option. And sometimes the gloves, taking them off or donning and docking the gloves can present additional risks. So in the retail sector, minimal PPE only if identified in your risk assessment.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I mean, just sticking with yourself. We have a question here about one-way systems, which have become something that we've seen a lot of in shops recently. And it's been advised, certainly, that there's something worth considering. for some kind of shoe shops or clothing shops, it's often not possible. If there's tops on one side, if there's shoes on the other, it really just doesn't make sense. Have you any recommendations for people there?
Yeah, it was interesting to see Mags's diagrammatic of your floor layout, and sometimes this may need a business owner to stand back and actually maybe move things around where, while you may not have a total one-way system, you can still direct the general flow of your customers coming into the shop. So I think with a wee bit of thought, there still can be a general direction where you can take the flow of travel if your customers are around the shop, that they're not moving between sections as much maybe as they tended to before. So small independent retailers with very small floor space, it's a difficult one. But certainly if you have two doors and you can have an entrance and an exit, brilliant. That solves a lot of problems and certainly reduces the risk of transmission. And
I suppose following on from that, Mags, how do you make that one-way system kind of creative? You know, how do you make it less functional and more part of that shopping experience?
Okay. First principles, follow all the government guidelines. So clear signage on your floor with definitive directions, with social distancing markings, all of that. And it can be done, as we mentioned earlier, in a very kind, considerate and a thoughtful way, so that it doesn't come across as aggressive almost. And having, Elizabeth mentioned earlier, having a member of staff to guide and interact with customers is really a really great idea. It's that human contact and that reassurance as well. Plus, from a practical point of view, you're able to manage the situation. To do it creatively, look at your shop fitting systems at the moment, your mid-floor gondolas, tables, shelf units, things that you use to display things on, and see how you can rearrange those to create the walls or the barriers, the pathways. So it might be just moving a table with maybe some merchandise on it or some stock, bearing in mind you have to keep more frequently cleaning, or using your clothes rails. Perhaps instead of having clothes hanging on the rails, you could hang some really nice hanging plants on macrame stands or pot holders, or streamers, things like that, or maybe some little signs that again have positive reinforced messages on them. So create new walls, new barriers using your mannequins, plants or flower arrangements, your rails, your shelving units, and again maybe some positive messages of signage on blackboards or clear acrylic partitions. That will help you create a creative one-way system.
And I suppose one way, Mags, of getting around the whole issue of creating one-way systems is to maybe look at the online side of businesses. Is that something you would advise, and what sort of social platforms would you advise that people use?
Yes, is the in a word, yes, get online. What has been absolutely apparent is that those businesses who had an online presence, and particularly an e-commerce online presence, were able to maintain trading throughout these last few months. I, even as in a personal experience of my own business, I am now embarking on developing a whole new e-commerce online presence, since I can't go to my customers face-to-face to do mentoring and training and show them how to do their windows. So I'm developing that. But in essence, yes, absolutely, you need to have an online presence. To sell your products online, there are lots of platforms that we would know about, say Etsy, not on the high street, Facebook, eBay, etc. They are all very specific to whatever your type of business is. So my advice would be engage with your local council to see what support is available to help you develop that new side of your business. Because you should seek out specialist e-commerce and digital marketing mentors on that. But to summarize, yes, I think now is really the time, as we revamp how we look at our businesses, an online presence is enough.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Super. Elizabeth, you mentioned this earlier, but changing rooms are a bit of a sticky subject. We've had a question in about, are customers allowed to use changing rooms, and are staff allowed to help people try on clothes in them?
So that is one of the huge challenges facing the small independent clothes retailers, David. And so the guidance, and there only is that one piece of guidance, government guidance at the moment, which is suggesting that unfortunately, fitting rooms should not be open, except for, there is that one exemption where it talks about essential workers trying on clothing, and it's protective clothing. As the advice that we're giving certainly to those type of businesses that I've covered earlier is, and maybe retailers should be starting to think about that down the line, as hopefully this is a very fluid situation and there's guidance coming out all the time and the regulations are changing all the time, but they should be starting to think about what options they can safely provide. And as I say, that may be just using alternative changing rooms. It may be looking at the soft furnishings inside those changing rooms. So start to think about those options. And equally with the fitting side of things, you know, there are solutions out there, and certainly the shoe shops that have come up with some solutions. And we saw some retail solutions for fitting. And I know with bridal fitting and that, this is really important. So I would say keep your eyes open, and hopefully the guidance will, as the transmission of the virus reduces, the guidance will start to allow the reopening of fitting rooms. But at the moment, unfortunately, that's where we are.
I suppose following on from that, when people take clothes home and maybe decide to return them, should there be a time limit introduced on that? Should there, you know, and when clothes are returned, is there a protocol for what you do with those clothes? Do you need to set them aside? Do you need to spray them or disinfect them?
Yeah, very much. Certainly any clothing that's tried on, the recommendation at the moment is 72 hours, and that applies to clothing that is returned. So the shop will have to put that aside in a container or in a separate room for 72 hours. As far as customers taking clothes home, that really is a choice that business has to make, and I suppose they have to decide if that is an option that they're going to do. And obviously a lot of our larger retailers, that is a practice where you buy the clothes, you take them home, but obviously then there is, you can take them back if you're not happy. So management and owners of businesses need to be thinking what they're going to do if customers ask and want to take the clothes home.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Okay, well, our time is rapidly running out. I want to, first of all, Mags and Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your expertise. I know that hundreds of retailers will find it really, really useful. As they make their first kind of tentative steps back to a semblance of normality, your guidance will be a big help, and hopefully in the coming days and weeks we'll see the tills ringing again. Also, thank you to everybody out there for watching this. If you're a retail business and need any more help or assistance, don't hesitate to get in touch with the council by emailing regeneration@armagh-bambridge-craigavon.gov.uk or visiting the ABC Council website. Thank you again to all our guests, and we'll see you again on the next ABC webinar.